What's up, everybody? Today we are going to be ranking our top homologation specials. Homologation specials are kind of an if you know car, but those that love them really love homologation specials. If you're not familiar with what a homologation special is, I have an example behind me. But essentially, in race classes, there is certain rules and certain classes where you have to create a certain amount of road-going production versions of the vehicle in order to compete in that race. I love rally cars, which tend to be a lot of the different homologation specials we've gotten over the years, including the one behind me. So what we're going to do today is we are going to rank the top 10 obtainable ones. Now, obtainable is going to be a little bit of a loose definition, right? All of these are obviously limited runs because a lot of these cars were just made to the production limit set by the rules that you had to make. And then obtainable, once again, is kind of a budget thing, right? Like to some people, obtainable based on your budget is 10 grand. To some people, obtainable is 200 grand. But obtainable is more that they actually come up for sale and they actually are buyable if you have the budget for them. So we're going to do 10 obtainable cars, obtainable, and then we're going to do 5 unobtainable cars or unobtainium. And we're going to do 5. There is some that have been cars that have been left off of both lists that I really wanted to put on there, but we can't go through every homologation special ever. That would be an hour-long plus video, and I already yap enough as it is. So we're going to start off with our top 10 obtainable homologation special cars. So coming in at number 10, we have the GR Yaris. Now this is number 10 for 2 reasons. One, it's not really a collector car yet, and it's not sold in North America. Now, a lot of these cars were not sold in North America. In fact, most of these cars weren't sold in North America, but now all of them are 25 years or older and you can get them, so they are obtainable. But the GR Yaris, it was homologated for WRC. It's front engine, all-wheel drive, 3-cylinder turbo with 300 horsepower. And initially 25,000 were planned, but the demand was so high for them that Toyota has kind of uncapped that. And throughout Europe and Asia and Australia, they might be in Africa. The demand was high enough that they were going beyond the 25,000 that they were required to make. And they're really cool. I think they're cooler than the GR Corolla. And if they were in America, they would definitely be a considerable daily driver, although I definitely prefer the 4 doors of the Corolla for daily driver duty. At number 9, we have the only American/muscle cars on here. It is the only American cars on either list, and that is the Charger Daytona and Roadrunner Superbirds. You've seen them before. They're the old muscle cars with the giant right angular wings. They were originally homologated for NASCAR, but this is a different case of homologation. Back in NASCAR, back then, you had to have your race cars, and it might still be the rule now. I'm not very familiar with NASCAR, honestly, but they had to be the shape of the car that you sold to the public, and they wanted to, Chrysler, for both Dodge and then Plymouth, wanted to put these nose cones on these cars and these big wings and use them in NASCAR. So they sold them to the public just so then they could then use them in NASCAR. They came front engine, rear wheel drive, just like all muscle cars. They came standard with a 440 cubic inch V8. There was, now can't remember the time. There was another V8. The Plymouth came with a 6-pack carburetor that you couldn't get on the Charger, but they standard with the 440 cubic inch V8. They came with 375 horsepower, which is still a good amount now. Back in 1969 and 1970 was made, that was a lot of power. And there was 3,000 Charger Daytonas made and 1,935 Roadrunners made total. So they're not ultra rare, but they're pretty hard to find, especially in good condition nowadays, because back then people didn't really like them, people didn't want them, so the ones that bought them for the most part didn't treat them well. I don't know how many survivors there are out there, but there's definitely a lot that were ratted out. Moving on to number 8 is the Celica GT4, which had 3 generations across 86 all the way through 1999. They were homologated for the World Rally Championship Group A. Their front engine, all-wheel drive. They had 2-liter inline-4 turbos for their entire run. Their 3 generations were the ST165 from 86 to 89, the ST185 from 89 to 93, and then the ST205 from 94 to 99. They were created, the production numbers were 26,500 for the first generation, 21,000 for the second generation, and then only $2,500 for the ST205 third generation, which in my mind is the best looking one, is the one that I would really want. I think it's the coolest looking one. And it's a car that I actually really want to have in my garage one day because I think it's so cool. It looks so good. I love the 4 individual headlights on it. I love everything about it. Moving on to number 7 is kind of a forgotten homologation special, and that's the Pulsar GTIR, also known as the Sunny GTR from Nissan. That was made from 90 to 94. It was also homologated for WRC Group A. It's front engine, all-wheel drive, 2-liter inline-4 turbo, but not just any inline-4 turbo. If you're familiar with JDM cars, especially Nissan from that time period, you know the SR20 DET. So this is a all-wheel drive hatchback with the SR20 DET, which is one of the things that makes it really desirable because there's so much aftermarket support for that engine, where that's not really the case for most of the cars on this list because the engines were made specifically for that car and niche. But it had 227 horsepower, which in a little light hatchback with all-wheel drive is certainly more than enough. And the production numbers were 14,613. So not the rarest car on this list, not as much as a normal production car. There's certainly examples out there. And because they've been kind of forgotten and not as loved as other cars on this list, compared to a lot of things on the list, they're fairly cheap. You can get them in the high teens to low 20s, which is part of the reason why they're ranked as high as they are on this list. They might be a little further back, but I love a Pulsar GTIR. It's probably the car that I'm targeting the most on this list to eventually have because they're on the cheaper end and there's a good amount of them out there. Moving on to number 6, we have the Lancer Evolution, the Evos. You know the Evos. A little bit of a cheat here. It's not just one car. It's generations 1 through 6, all of the homologation cars. 7, 8, 9, and 10 were less so homologation cars, especially 10. But they were originally homologated for WRC Group A, just like most cars on this list. And those generations run from 92 to 2000 with about 2 years per generation, give or take. They're front engine, all-wheel drive, 2-liter inline-4 turbos. You know the 4G63T if you're into JDM cars, especially Evos. One of the most famous 4-cylinder power plants. And they started out 247 horsepower. Then in the Evo 2, they were 256 horsepower. The Evo 3 was 266 horsepower. And then Evos 4 through 6 and 7 were 276 horsepower from the gentleman's agreement. Especially when you get later, they really get over 300 up to like 330, 340, somewhere in there when you put them on dynos. But they were 276 horsepower due to the JDM gentleman's agreement that was in place for the safety of not having people racing around in the streets in their fast cars. And the productions are by generation 5,000, 6,322, 10,080, 10,000, 7,500, 8,391. I, of all these, would want a 4, 5, or 6. So the fact that those are 10,000, 7,500, 8,391 are great. Now, these, compared to their production numbers, are one of the more expensive cars on the list. These cars are very loved and very wanted by a lot of people. The Evos in general, all the way through at least the 9 and kind of the 10, are very loved, very desirable cars. And a lot of them are usually kept pretty nice, especially now when people get their hands on them. A lot of people want to restore them because they're the Evos. Moving on to number 5 is the Renault R5 Turbo, which was produced from 80 to 84. That was homologated for FIA, which is French acronym, but in English it's the International Automobile Federation or Federation of Automobiles. But that's what the WRC was previously, was the FIA. This also was a Group A rally car. It was mid-rear engine and rear-wheel drive, but when you look at this car, it's got these really wide haunches because it's based off of the Renault R5 that was originally front engine, front-wheel drive. They put the engine in behind the front seats, made it mid-rear engine, converted to rear-wheel drive for their rally car. And the earlier Turbo 1 got a 1.4-liter inline-4 turbo, and the Turbo 2 got a 1.5-liter inline-4 turbo. They had between 178 horsepower all the way up to the 380 horsepower, which was like the Evo 2 competition, something. It was a very limited trim. Most of the ones you're going to find are about 178 to about 200 horsepower, but it's a light rear mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, rally hatchback. It's enough power for that car. And total production numbers between the Turbo 1 and the Turbo 2, with majority of them being the Turbo 2, is 4,987. So not a lot out there. Probably the most expensive. It is the most expensive car on the obtainable list. That's one of the reasons why this list is really obtainable and not obtainable. These in good condition go under 200, but a good amount over 100. You can find some higher mileage or slightly less nice ones that go for high 60s all the way up to the low 90s, depending on when you buy them, where you buy them from, and some other factors. But these are the most expensive on the list. So number 4 is this bad boy right here. That's the Pajero Evolution from Mitsubishi, made from 1997 to 1999. It's a front engine, all-wheel drive with this car, selectable all-wheel drive. It's base is in rear-wheel drive. It's where I keep it in. I don't put it in the 4 high or low because I'd rather just drive in a rear-wheel drive. But that was homologated for Dakar. It's the only Dakar car on here. It's the only SUV on here. And being one of the only, if not the only, purely homologation special SUVs, it had to be high on this list. I wanted to put it higher, but the 3, I couldn't put it above the 3 above it. But I can't speak. The Pajero Evolution, 276 horsepower, although it feels like it is 276 horsepower. Hard to tell. It's a pretty heavy car. It is an SUV. So, that 276 horsepower feels a lot slower than the 276 horsepower of other JDM cars of the era because this is an SUV and it's big and heavy. And this is really 4-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive, because it was for Dakar, because it's an SUV. So it's really 4-wheel drive and not all-wheel drive. And depending on who you ask, some will tell you there's 2,500 made, but there's about 2,693 made total, 2,500 automatics, 193 manuals. Fun fact, the guy that I bought this from that owns the importing and company and dealership, down in Greenville, Import Auto Center, he switches his daily driver between an NSX and a manual Pajero Evolution. Cool guy, cool car, but the manuals are impossible to find, and he has it on TEs, which is hilarious. I wish I took a picture of it. But I love it. It's the first car I checked off on this list. I plan to check a lot of cars off on this list, and I bought it because I wanted a car that had some ground clearance, and this one came for sale, and it was one of my realistic dream cars, just like a lot of the cars on this list are realistic dream cars. So Pajero Evolution, I could go on and on about it forever. I'll have to eventually make a video talking just about the history and the creation of the Pajero Evolution, but I can't keep going on. We got to move on to number 3. And at number 3, we have the Lancia Delta HF Integrale, maybe the coolest hot hatch of all time. It might be higher on this list, but getting parts for them and getting anyone to work on them at all is almost impossible. They're really, really hard cars to own, which, is going to cap their market value. Right now, really nice ones are like in the 90s, low hundreds. Some less nice ones are in the 60s, especially for the Evo 1. Really hard to get. But another WRC rally car, Group A. It's front engine, all-wheel drive, 2.0 liter inline 4 turbo, which is common. There was 2 generations of it, the Evo 1 and the Evo 2. The Evo 1s had about 207 horsepower. The Evo 2s had about 212 horsepower. So not a big difference in horsepower. I think there's a bigger difference in torque, but I didn't write it down. And the production numbers for the Evo 1 were about 5,700. Another reason why it's a little cheaper. And for the Evo 2s, 4,223. The Evo 2s definitely cost a lot more, and they're definitely the ones that will retain more value and more desirable. But all in all, this car is probably not a desirable ownership unless you can really afford to just have it sit and you have a lot of space to just put it away somewhere if anything breaks. Because if it's broken, it's going to be a while till it's fixed more than likely. Maybe you can send them back over to Europe. I don't know. They're just known to be really hard to own. At number 2, we have the car that really got me into homologation specials and rally cars, and that is the Ford Escort Cosworth RS. I wanted to also put the Sierra Cosworth on this list, but I had to pick between the 2, and the Escort is the one that really captured me, really got me into homologation specials and rally cars, and made me look into the history of rally and all that, and I just love the Escort Cosworth RS. But another WRC Group A car, front engine, rear all-wheel drive, 2.0 liter inline 4 turbo, 224 horsepower. And, everyone talks about the 4G63 or on this list, the SR20 and how much you can modify those and get a lot of power out of them. I've heard that on the Cosworth, Escort RS Cosworth's 2 liter inline 4 turbo, if you do the mods right and you do some preventative maintenance, you can get like 400 horsepower out of them. And this with 400 horsepower and all-wheel drive, not weighing very much, would just be a rocket. And then, of course, this is also on the list because of the iconic double-deck whale tail spoiler. Now, there was an option to remove it completely and just have the hatch. And then there was another spoiler that you could get on there. But if you don't have the whale tail, I don't know what you're doing. The whale tail is so iconic and it looks so cool. And it took that from the Sierra before it. And it's one of the reasons why I love this car so much. But at number one, it's the E30 M3, the original M3. Honestly, one of the most important cars in European car history. It kicked off the real love of these performance saloons or coupes in this case. It really made people love these types of cars, you know, with the 190E and the 500E. A lot of their popularity is owned to the E30 M3, and it was hard to not put it number one on the list for that reason, but also in a general sense and not just my personal preference, maybe the best looking car on the obtainable list. It's obtainable. They're hold their value really well. They are getting more and more expensive, and they're really cool cars. They look great in every color they came in. But these were homologated for DTM, or I'm going to butcher this, Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft. It was racing for what do they call it? Not executive, I guess executive cars or saloon cars, like the E30 M3, like these German sedans or like non-sports coupes, essentially, is what DTM racing was for. These were created from 86 to 91. They were front engine, rear wheel drive. They have a 2-liter or up to a 2.5-liter inline four, depending on the year you get and some of the specialized trims, and between 192 and 235 horsepower. But once again, that 235 horsepower is like a really small, limited number, specialized trim. You're going to be looking at more and getting like the 192 to about 200 horsepower. So they're not fast, but you know, everything I hear is they just handle amazing. They're absolutely iconic. They're legendary. They're extremely important in car history. And they're a lot more gettable than a lot of cars on this list because the production numbers were 17,970. Almost 18,000 were made across the world. And they were sold in America as well. So you can find American examples. The only shame is that we never got an E30 M3 wagon, because obviously now in Europe they have an M3 wagon, we have M5 wagons. So it's a shame that this did not come in an E30 wagon because I love the E30 wagon, but it was impossible to not put this number one on the list, even though I personally would rather have a Cosworth RS. I would rather probably have the Pajero Evolution. And if it wasn't so hard to own, I would rather have the Delta Integrale, but you know, I would rather have an E30 M3 than the Delta Integrale because of the ownership experience. So that's our 10 obtainable cars. Now we're going to look at 5 unobtainium cars. So a common theme here is a lot of Group B, a lot of rally. And starting off with that is the Audi Sport Quattro, made in 1984 for Group B. A lot of these Group B cars were made for 1 year because Group B was quickly canceled, because as awesome as it was and amazing as it was also extremely dangerous for drivers and spectators. It was a shame Group B was so dangerous and had to be canceled, but it did have to be canceled. But this was front engine, all-wheel drive, 2.1-liter inline 5 turbo, the only 5-cylinder at all on either one of these lists. An absolute rally legend that really changed and shifted the motorsport landscape with the Quattro system, and really shifted who Audi really was. It had 302 horsepower and only 224 were produced. They're extremely expensive. There was a lesser non-homologation Quattro that was sold that is still really cool, something really desirable, just at least for its shape. But I love the way these look. These are insane cars, and if I won the lottery, one would end up in my garage. Moving on to number 4, and this only being number 4 is kind of controversial, but it's the CLK GTR. Those were made from 98 to 99. They were homologated for FIA's GT Championship. Their rear engine, rear wheel drive, 6.9-liter naturally aspirated V12, just insane sounding, super cool, carbon fiber monocoque, 625 natural horsepower and a high revving V12. But they only made 28 of them. There was 20 standard production ones, like 6 roadsters and two concept or like test vehicles that they ended up selling to the public. So there's only 28 out there in the world. Insanely rare, insanely expensive. And their rarity is part of the reason why I didn't put them higher. At number 3, we actually have Ford on this list again, but just like the Escort and the Sierra, it's not really American Ford, it's European Ford, and that is the RS200. The car that honestly on this list, on either list, if I won lottery, it'd be the number 1 car that I would want to put in my garage. But it's another Group B rally car, rear engine, all-wheel drive, between a 1.8 and 2.1 liter turbo, inline 4 turbo. The 2.1 liter was in the Evolution trim, and just the standard trim was 250 horsepower. And if you could get your hands on an Evolution trim, it was 600 horsepower and about a 3 second 0 to 60 in this little tiny rally hatch. Insane little vehicle. The production was about 200 regulars and about 24 Evolution models. Another insanely low production, super rare car, but just so cool and just such a product of an insane era. At number 2, we have another Group B car, and that is the Porsche 959. I believe they also ended up taking 959 to Dakar, if I remember correctly. But it was originally homologated for Group B, rear engine, all-wheel drive, 2.8 liter flat 6 twin turbo, putting out 444 horsepower. And this was a car that was considered very advanced technologically at its time, and really was kind of the grandfather of the modern hypercar. The all-wheel drive, the really high horsepower for the time. It had a lot of tech that a lot of cars didn't have, and actually had a comfort trim and a sport trim, but only 337 total were ever made. Maybe my favorite Porsche of all time. And the 911 GT1 is not on this list because I just didn't want to put 2 cars from the same manufacturer on different spots on the list. And it wasn't like the Charger Daytona and the Superbird where they were really the same car. But the 911 GT1's on this list because I wanted to try to keep it to about 1 manufacturer per these 2 lists. And the 959 is maybe my favorite Porsche of all time, even if that's kind of a hot take. And finally, at number 1, a car that's for Group B. For most people, depending on who you ask, it's not. That's the 288 GTO. They made this for Group B, and then before they could get it into Group B was canceled. So then they looked at us homologating it for the GT racing class. This was actually based off of the Ferrari 308. That's why they look so similar. But to me, it's my favorite of the Ferrari 5. It's the best looking of that holy grail of 5 Ferraris. I absolutely love it. It's a rear mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, 2.9 liter turbo V8. Makes 395 horsepower. And like I said, it's my favorite. It's probably my favorite Ferrari ever. I think it just looks so good. I love it. They were all painted in the Rosso Corso red paint that Ferrari is so famous for, but they only made 272 of them. So they're super expensive, very rare, super unobtainable. But that is my list of my favorite homologation specials of all time, both the obtainable and the unobtainable cars. I love rally cars. I love homologation specials, and pretty much all these cars met both of those requirements. And so I absolutely love all of these cars on the list, and almost every homologation special ever I just deeply love. But thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you like car content and you want to see mine first. And comment down below your favorite homologation specials, or what you thought of my ranks, or what I left off that should be on this list. Let me know everything in the comments down below. I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.